Sugar is one of the most ubiquitous substances in our diets. It hides in plain sight in the obvious places like candy soda and desserts, but also in bread pasta sauce, salad dressings, and even so-called health bars. It's sweet, seductive, and as decades of research now suggest, dangerously addictive. But this story isn't just about personal cravings. It's about how an entire industry systematically shaped our eating habits while burying the truth about its harm. The history of sugar is a history of power. It begins in the colonial era, when sugar plantations fueled empires, built fortunes, and relied heavily on enslaved labor. By the 19th century, sugar had become a staple of the Western diet, symbolizing both wealth and indulgence. Over time, industrialization made it cheap and accessible to everyone, transforming it from a luxury item into a daily necessity. By the mid-20th century, consumption had skyrocketed, and sugar was embedded in almost every processed food. But alongside its rise came growing concerns. Doctors began noticing a correlation between sugar consumption and a range of health issues, tooth decay, obesity, and later metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes. In the 1960s and 70s, a small but persistent group of scientists began investigating whether sugar could be a root cause of heart disease, a role traditionally blamed on dietary fat. Their findings were unsettling. High sugar intake seemed to contribute to elevated triglycerides, insulin resistance, and chronic inflammation. The sugar industry reacted swiftly and decisively. Internal documents later uncovered by investigative journalists revealed that trade groups like the Sugar Research Foundation funded research designed to downplay sugar's risks while shifting the blame to fat. In one notorious example, they paid prominent Harvard scientists to publish papers in prestigious journals that redirected public concern towards saturated fat, effectively shaping decades of nutrition policy. This strategy was alarmingly effective. Governments and health organizations began promoting low-fat diets, which often replaced fat with sugar and refined carbohydrates to maintain flavor. Breakfast cereals, low-fat yogurts, and diet snacks were loaded with sugar, marketed as healthy choices. As fat disappeared from labels, sugar filled the gap, and consumers unknowingly consumed more of it than ever before. Meanwhile, the addictive properties of sugar remained an open secret. Studies in both animals and humans showed that sugar could trigger reward pathways in the brain similar to those activated by drugs like cocaine. People experienced cravings, withdrawal symptoms, and a loss of control over their intake. But rather than acknowledging this, the industry leaned into the psychology of addiction engineering products, with the bliss point, the perfect combination of sugar, fat, and salt, to keep consumers coming back. By the early 2000s, the health consequences were undeniable. Rates of obesity, diabetes, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease surged globally. In some countries, these conditions reached epidemic proportions. Public health advocates began pushing for change, warning labels, sugar taxes, restrictions on marketing to children. But they were met with fierce resistance from industry lobbyists, who argued that sugar was part of a balanced diet and that personal responsibility, not regulation, was the answer. Behind closed doors, companies conducted their own research into consumer behavior, learning exactly how to hook people and keep them hooked. They knew, for example, that sugar could hijack the brain's dopamine system, creating a cycle of desire and reward. They knew that starting young was key, that if children developed a taste for sweetness early, they would carry that preference into adulthood. And so the marketing focused heavily on kids using cartoon mascots, colorful packaging, and tie-ins with movies and TV shows. This was not just a matter of selling candy bars and sodas. It was about shaping the food environment itself, making it nearly impossible to avoid sugar without deliberate effort. Supermarkets placed sweets at checkout aisles. Fast food chains upsold sugary drinks and desserts. Even healthy brands leaned on sugar to make their products more palatable. The result was a global diet dominated by sweetened products and a population increasingly hooked on them. But the tide was beginning to turn. Whistleblowers, investigative journalists, and independent scientists started to piece together the full story. They exposed the tactics used by the sugar industry to mislead the public, manipulate science, and protect profits at the expense of health. In the years ahead, these revelations would spark lawsuits, regulatory battles, and a broader reckoning about the role of corporate influence in public health. This is where our investigation begins, at the intersection of science, politics, and corporate power. In the next part, we'll dive into the science of sugar addiction, exploring how something so common can exert such a powerful grip on the brain and why breaking free is far harder than most people realize. To understand why sugar has such a powerful hold over billions of people, we need to step into the intricate network of the human brain, a system evolved over millions of years to reward behaviors essential to survival, like finding food. Sweetness in nature is rare and valuable. In prehistoric times, the taste of sugar signaled a safe, energy-rich food source like ripe fruit or honey. Consuming it gave a quick energy boost, a survival advantage in a world where food could be scarce. But evolution did not prepare our brains for the modern food environment, where refined sugar is abundant, concentrated, and engineered into nearly everything we eat. Today, the amount of sugar available to us is unprecedented in human history, and our brains respond to it in ways eerily similar to addictive drugs. When we eat sugar, it stimulates the tongue's taste receptors, which sends signals to the brain's reward system, particularly the nucleus accumbens. This triggers a release of dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. Dopamine's job is to reinforce behaviors, making us want to repeat them. In moderation, this system works as intended, encouraging us to seek energy-rich foods when needed. But when sugar is consumed in large quantities and on a regular basis, the dopamine system becomes overstimulated. Over time, frequent sugar consumption can dull the brain's dopamine response, meaning we need more sugar to achieve the same pleasurable effect. This is the hallmark of tolerance, one of the defining characteristics of addiction. Studies in laboratory rats have shown that animals given intermittent access to sugar display binging behavior, withdrawal symptoms, and even cross-sensitization to drugs like amphetamines. The parallels between sugar and drug addiction are not just metaphorical. They are grounded in neuroscience. Withdrawal is another key piece of the puzzle. When sugar intake is suddenly reduced, people may experience irritability, headaches, fatigue, and intense cravings. This isn't just a lack of willpower. It's the brain's chemical balance trying to adjust to the absence of a substance it has come to rely on. These withdrawal symptoms are part of what makes cutting back on sugar so challenging, even for people who know it's harming their health. But sugar's influence goes beyond dopamine. It also affects opioidergic pathways, the same brain systems involved in pain relief and pleasure. This dual activation of dopamine and opioid receptors creates a powerful reinforcement loop. It's why that first bite of a chocolate chip cookie feels so satisfying, and why stopping at just one can feel nearly impossible. Sugar also impacts hormones like insulin and leptin, which regulate hunger and satiety. High sugar intake can lead to insulin resistance, a precursor to type 2 diabetes, and disrupt leptin signaling, making it harder for the brain to register when we're full. This hormonal disruption, combined with the reward system's overactivation, creates a perfect storm for overeating. Food scientists know this. In fact, the concept of the bliss point, the precise combination of sugar, fat, and salt that maximizes palatability, was developed through extensive research and testing. The food industry spends millions each year fine-tuning recipes to hit this bliss point, ensuring that products are as crave-inducing as possible. This is not accidental. It is a calculated strategy to keep consumers coming back for more. Children are especially vulnerable. Their reward systems are highly sensitive, and repeated exposure to high-sugar foods can set lifelong preferences. Studies have found that children exposed to sugary diets early on are more likely to crave sweets and struggle with self-regulation around food later in life. This is why so much of the marketing for sugary products targets kids, from cartoon mascots on cereal boxes to candy tie-ins with popular movies. The addictive nature of sugar also creates a ripple effect beyond individual health. People trapped in cycles of craving and overconsumption are more likely to develop obesity, heart disease, liver problems, and mental health issues like anxiety and depression. These conditions put enormous strain on healthcare systems worldwide, costing billions in treatment and lost productivity. And yet, despite mounting scientific evidence, The food and beverage industries have been slow or outright resistant to acknowledge sugar's addictive potential. Official dietary guidelines often frame sugar as something to be consumed in moderation without addressing the structural barriers that make moderation so difficult. It's like telling someone to drink alcohol responsibly while surrounding them with free shots at every corner. If the science linking sugar to addiction and chronic disease is so compelling, why did it take decades for the public to hear about it? The answer lies in a sophisticated multi-billion-dollar campaign by the sugar industry to protect its image shape, public perception, and neutralize emerging threats. This wasn't just a PR effort, it was a systematic operation involving funding research, influencing government policy, and infiltrating academic and health institutions. The blueprint for this campaign can be traced back to the 1960s, when the Sugar Research Foundation, a powerful trade organization representing the largest sugar producers in the United States, faced mounting scientific evidence linking sugar consumption to heart disease. At the time, Dr. John Yudkin, a British physiologist, published his groundbreaking book, Pure White and Deadly, in which he argued that sugar, not fat, was the primary driver of cardiovascular disease. His findings threatened to upend the entire food industry. The sugar industry acted swiftly. Internal memos uncovered decades later by researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, revealed that the Sugar Research Foundation paid prominent Harvard scientists the equivalent of $50,000 in today's money to produce a review article in the New England Journal of Medicine. This article downplayed the role of sugar in heart disease and shifted the blame entirely onto dietary fat and cholesterol. The strategy worked. Public health campaigns for the next 40 years focused on low-fat diets, which ironically led to a surge in consumption of sugar-laden fat-free products. It wasn't just research manipulation. The sugar industry invested heavily in lobbying efforts, ensuring that government dietary guidelines remained vague about sugar. When the first US dietary guidelines were published in 1980, they recommended reducing fat and cholesterol, but made no specific limits for sugar intake. That omission wasn't accidental, it was the result of intense behind-the-scenes pressure from corporate interests. The industry also worked to infiltrate health organizations. Companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, whose products rely on massive amounts of sugar-sponsored major medical associations, fitness organizations, and even scientific conferences. By funding these institutions, they created a conflict of interest, making it less likely that these organizations would take a strong stance against sugar consumption. When independent researchers did manage to publish studies linking sugar to obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, the industry used familiar tobacco-style tactics to discredit them. They labeled the findings as junk science-funded counter-studies to create confusion and launched media campaigns questioning the motives of the researchers. The goal was not to prove sugar safe, it was to create enough doubt to delay regulation and keep consumers hooked. Advertising was another powerful weapon. From the 1970s onward, sugar-rich products were aggressively marketed as part of a healthy lifestyle. Breakfast cereal ads claimed to be fortified with vitamins and minerals, while burying the fact that each serving contained several spoonfuls of sugar. Soft drink commercials associated soda with youth freedom and fun, never with the health consequences of excessive sugar intake. The industry understood that if it could tie sugar to identity and emotion, it could override rational health concerns. This manipulation extended to children in ways that today seem shocking. Cartoon characters like Tony the Tiger, the Trix Rabbit, and Count Chocula became household icons, their sole purpose to push sugar-laden cereals onto kids. The packaging was colorful and playful, and the products were often given away as part of movie tie-ins or school promotions. By the time a child reached adulthood, their taste preferences were already shaped, not by nutrition, but by decades of corporate marketing. And the reach wasn't limited to the United States. As markets in the West became saturated, the sugar industry turned its focus to developing nations using the same tactics to build demand. In countries with little regulation and rising incomes, sugary drinks and snacks flooded store shelves. The result was a rapid increase in obesity, diabetes, and dental decay in regions that had never faced such epidemics before. The most insidious part of this story is how successful these efforts have been. Even today, many people believe that fat is the main dietary villain, and that sugar, while not ideal, is relatively harmless in small amounts. They don't realize that the small amounts in their daily diet, hidden in bread, pasta sauce-flavored yogurts and energy drinks, add up to far more than the body can handle. As we move deeper into this investigation, the parallels to the tobacco industry become impossible to ignore. Both industries knew their products were harmful. Both industries manipulated science-influenced policy and used marketing to target vulnerable populations. And both industries operated on a simple truth: addiction is good for business. By the early 2010s, the mountain of evidence linking excessive sugar consumption to obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illnesses was too large to ignore. Public health advocates, nutrition scientists, and policymakers began calling for bold action. The proposals were clear: impose taxes on sugary drinks, add warning labels to high-sugar products, ban advertising to children, and set strict limits on added sugar in processed foods. But pushing through these measures meant going head-to-head with one of the most profitable and politically connected sectors in the world, the sugar and beverage industries. What followed was a high-stakes global battle that continues to this day, with billions of dollars, corporate reputations, and public health hanging in the balance. One of the first major flashpoints came in 2014, when Mexico, facing one of the highest obesity rates in the world, introduced a nationwide tax on sugary drinks. The law added a 1 peso per liter tax to sodas and other sweetened beverages. Almost immediately, soda sales dropped by 6% in the first year and 10% in the second year, with the steepest declines among low-income households. For public health officials, this was proof that fiscal policy could work. The beverage industry, however, saw it as a dangerous precedent. The fear wasn't just about losing sales in Mexico, it was about other countries following suit. Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and local bottling companies poured money into lobbying, PR campaigns, and even lawsuits to fight similar proposals elsewhere. They argued that sugar taxes were regressive, hurting the poor, and framed the debate as an issue of personal choice rather than corporate responsibility. But the movement was spreading. Cities like Berkeley, California, and Philadelphia passed their own soda taxes. The United Kingdom introduced a soft drinks industry levy in 2018, which encouraged companies to reformulate their products with less sugar to avoid higher taxes. In Chile, the government implemented strict front-of-package warning labels for foods high in sugar, salt, and fat, along with advertising bans targeting children. Early studies showed significant reductions in sugar purchases as a result. The industry's counterattack was swift and sophisticated. Front groups, organizations funded by corporate interests but presented as independent, emerged to argue against regulation. They produced reports claiming that sugar taxes led to job losses in the beverage industry, hurt small businesses, and had little impact on public health. These groups often worked in tandem with politicians friendly to corporate donors, ensuring that many proposed laws died before they could even reach a vote. Advertising remained one of the most contentious battlegrounds. Despite overwhelming evidence that marketing sugary products to children increases consumption and shapes lifelong habits, many countries still lack comprehensive restrictions. Companies exploit this gap by moving advertising online, where regulations are weaker, and tracking technology allows them to target children with precision. Social media influencers, video game sponsorships, and viral marketing campaigns ensure that sugary products remain culturally relevant and addictive to younger generations. Meanwhile, lawsuits began to emerge, echoing the legal battles that eventually brought down big tobacco. In the United States, class action suits accused soda companies of deceptive marketing, particularly their portrayal of sugary drinks as compatible with a healthy, active lifestyle. Plaintiffs pointed to internal documents showing that companies knew about the health risks but chose to downplay or ignore them. While many of these cases faced uphill battles in court, they succeeded in drawing public attention to the industry's tactics. In response to mounting pressure, some companies began publicly pledging to reduce sugar content in their products. But critics noted that these voluntary measures were often cosmetic, cutting sugar in one product, while introducing new, equally unhealthy items in another category. Reformulations sometimes replace sugar with artificial sweeteners, which carry their own health concerns and do little to address the addictive cycle. At the same time, the debate over sugar addiction entered mainstream media. Documentaries like Fed Up and That Sugar Film brought the issue to a wider audience, showing the hidden sugar content in everyday foods and the industry's role in keeping it there. Medical professionals began speaking more openly about sugar as an addictive substance, with some calling for treatment programs similar to those for drug and alcohol dependence. The stakes could not be higher. According to the World Health Organization, non-communicable diseases linked to poor diets now account for more deaths worldwide than infectious diseases. If sugar consumption continues at current levels, the economic and human costs will be staggering, from overburdened healthcare systems to shortened lifespans and diminished quality of life. And yet, for every small victory in the fight against big sugar, there is a counter-move designed to protect profits. The industry's resilience lies in its ability to adapt, whether through lobbying, rebranding, or shifting markets. The war is far from over, and the next front may not be in the West at all. As public health campaigns and regulations began to gain traction in wealthier nations, the sugar industry looked abroad for its next wave of profits. The emerging markets of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, home to billions of people, became the new battleground. For companies like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestlé, and countless local beverage producers, these regions offered an irresistible combination: rapidly growing populations, rising incomes, and minimal regulation. In many of these countries, processed foods and sugary drinks were still considered luxury items. Soda was not an everyday beverage, but a treat reserved for special occasions. The industry saw an opportunity to change that, to turn an occasional indulgence into a daily habit. The strategy was eerily familiar: saturate the market with products, flood the airwaves with advertising, and link sugar to modernity, prosperity, and happiness. Billboards appeared in the bustling streets of Lagos, Manila, and São Paulo, featuring smiling families enjoying brightly colored sodas under slogans about joy and togetherness. In rural towns where clean drinking water was scarce, sugary beverages were marketed not just as a tasty alternative, but as the safe choice, a devastatingly effective tactic in places where waterborne diseases remained a serious threat. The results were predictable. Within a decade, soda consumption in many developing countries skyrocketed. In the Philippines, per capita consumption of sugary drinks nearly doubled between 2000 and 2010. In South Africa, sugary beverage sales grew by more than 60% in less than 15 years. These trends were mirrored across Latin America, where soft drink giants invested billions in bottling plants, distribution networks, and aggressive marketing campaigns. But the health consequences weren't far behind. Countries that once struggled primarily with malnutrition now faced the double burden of disease, undernutrition in poorer communities and obesity-related illnesses in others. Rates of type 2 diabetes climbed rapidly, straining healthcare systems that were often ill-equipped to manage chronic disease. Dentists in rural areas reported surges in tooth decay among children, many of whom had never before seen a bottle of soda. In some places, sugar even began to replace traditional diets. Street vendors selling fresh fruit juice or home-cooked meals were pushed out by convenience stores, stocked with brightly packaged snacks and sugary drinks. The cultural shift was profound and often irreversible. For younger generations, the taste of sugar wasn't just a preference, it was a baseline. Local governments, alarmed by the growing public health crisis, began to explore policy solutions. In 2016, South Africa proposed a sugar tax, similar to Mexico's, sparking an intense lobbying battle. Industry representatives argued that the tax would kill jobs in the beverage sector and unfairly target low-income consumers. Behind the scenes, they funded economic studies designed to cast doubt on the tax's effectiveness. The parallels to earlier fights in the US and Europe were uncanny, the same playbook applied to a new audience. In countries without strong public health infrastructure, the industry's influence was even more pronounced. Lobbyists forged close ties with politicians, sometimes offering to fund public projects in exchange for favorable treatment. Schools were outfitted with branded refrigerators and vending machines, ensuring that children were exposed to sugary products from an early age. Sponsorship of sports events and music festivals further cemented the industry's presence in youth culture. And then there was the rural outreach. In parts of Africa and South Asia, Beverage companies employed armies of small-scale vendors equipped with bicycles or pushcarts, delivering sodas and sweet snacks to the most remote villages. The strategy wasn't just about making products available, it was about making them ubiquitous. By the time any public health campaign could counter the messaging, sugary drinks had already embedded themselves in daily life. Some countries have fought back. Thailand introduced warning labels for high sugar products, and Chile's strict food labeling laws, among the toughest in the world, have become a model for others. But for every nation taking a stand, there are many more where corporate lobbying keeps regulation at bay. And even where taxes or labels are implemented, enforcement can be inconsistent, leaving loopholes for companies to exploit. The global expansion of sugar mirrors, the earlier spread of tobacco, a profitable product, a proven addictive mechanism, and a relentless marketing machine. The difference is that the health impacts of sugar, while devastating, take longer to manifest than smoking-related diseases. This delay works in the industry's favor, allowing them to build markets before the full weight of public health consequences becomes undeniable. As the industry's reach extends into every corner of the globe, the question is no longer whether we can prevent sugar's spread, it's whether we can contain the damage before it's too late. And that leads us to another layer of the problem: the way sugar addiction is compounded by deliberate misinformation and nutritional confusion, keeping consumers trapped in a cycle they barely understand. By the time public health officials began calling sugar the new tobacco, the industry had already mastered the art of managing its image. The strategies they pioneered in the mid-20th century, paying scientists shaping media narratives, funding friendly research, didn't disappear. They evolved. In the digital age, misinformation became faster, more sophisticated, and harder to trace. Today, most people are vaguely aware that too much sugar isn't good for them. But when asked how much is too much, the answers vary wildly. This confusion is no accident. The sugar industry thrives on ambiguity. If consumers believe that the science is unsettled, or that sugar is just another calorie source like any other, they're less likely to change their behavior and far less likely to support regulation. One of the most effective modern tactics is the funding of research designed to cast doubt on sugar's unique role in chronic disease. Instead of outright denying that sugar contributes to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease, industry-funded studies tend to emphasize multiple factors: physical inactivity, genetics, overall calorie intake, anything that spreads the blame. These studies rarely lie outright. Instead, they subtly frame findings in ways that minimize sugar's impact. A 2016 investigation by the Associated Press revealed that candy manufacturers had funded research suggesting that children who eat sweets tend to weigh less than those who don't. The conclusion: that candy, and by extension sugar, wasn't necessarily linked to obesity. Public health experts slammed the study as misleading, pointing out that it ignored crucial variables and was designed to produce a favorable outcome for the industry. Digital marketing has made this kind of manipulation even more powerful. Social media influencers, often paid but not always required to disclose sponsorships, promote sugary drinks and snacks to millions of followers. These influencers don't look like corporate spokespeople, they look like friends, role models, or trendsetters. A 30-second Instagram video showing a fitness influencer sipping a neon-colored energy drink can do more to normalize sugar consumption than any billboard or TV commercial. The industry also uses astroturfing, creating fake grassroots campaigns that appear to be led by concerned citizens, but are actually funded by corporate interests. For example, when soda taxes are proposed, consumer choice coalitions suddenly emerge, warning that such taxes will hurt small businesses and punish working families. Dig deeper, and you'll find these groups often receive significant funding from beverage companies and trade associations. Nutrition, labeling one of the most basic tools for informed choice, is another arena where the industry fights tooth and nail. In the US, it took decades to get added sugars listed separately on nutrition facts labels, and the rule only came into effect in 2020. Even then, the industry lobbied for long compliance timelines and exemptions for certain products. Globally, front-of-package labeling systems like the black warning labels in Chile are fiercely opposed by sugar producers who argue they oversimplify nutrition. And while regulators and advocates focus on sugary drinks, the industry quietly shifts its efforts toward other sugar-laden categories: flavored yogurts, granola bars, healthy smoothies, and plant-based milks. Many of these products are marketed as nutritious alternatives, but can contain just as much sugar as a candy bar. By diversifying the types of products that deliver sugar, the industry ensures its profits remain intact, even if soda sales decline. Perhaps the most insidious tactic is the co-opting of health and fitness messaging. Coca-Cola's now infamous Global Energy Balance Network, an initiative exposed in 2015, was funded by the company to promote the idea that obesity was due to lack of exercise, not diet. The message was subtle: you can drink all the soda you want, as long as you hit the gym. This framing shifts responsibility entirely onto individuals, ignoring the addictive nature of sugar and its widespread presence in processed foods. Even the debate around artificial sweeteners benefits Big Sugar. As health-conscious consumers try to cut back, they turn to products marketed as sugar-free or low sugar, often produced by the same companies that make traditional sugary goods. Artificial sweeteners keep consumers hooked on sweetness, maintaining the preference for sugary flavors and making it easier to switch back to real sugar products later. This modern misinformation machine doesn't just protect profits, it delays meaningful public health action. As long as consumers remain uncertain, lawmakers face less pressure to pass strict regulations. And every year of delay means another generation grows up in an environment where sugar is everywhere, cheap and culturally ingrained. But cracks are forming. Investigative journalism, academic whistleblowers, and health advocacy groups are beginning to expose the industry's tactics in real time. Social media, while a tool for marketing, is also a tool for counter-messaging, allowing grassroots health movements to bypass traditional media gatekeepers. The battle for truth is now waged on multiple fronts: legislative chambers, courtrooms, classrooms, and online comment sections. For decades, the dangers of sugar have been discussed in terms of numbers, percentages of daily calories, grams per serving, global obesity rates. But behind every statistic is a human story, a real life altered by a lifetime of consumption in a world built to encourage it. These stories reveal the cost not just in physical health, but in emotional well-being, financial stability, and generational legacy. In Houston, Texas, a mother named Maria recalls the first time her son's pediatrician told her he was pre-diabetic. He was 12 years old. Maria, who worked 2 jobs, relied on inexpensive packaged snacks and fast food to keep her children fed between her shifts. Sodas were a staple in the household, not because she thought they were healthy, but because they were cheap, filling, and always available. "It's not like I didn't care," she says, "but no one ever told me that those juices I was buying had more sugar than candy." By the time she learned to read labels carefully, her son's insulin resistance had worsened. Today, at 22, he's on daily medication, and his doctors warn that his condition will likely shorten his lifespan. In rural India, Ramesh works as a schoolteacher in a village where clean water is unreliable. The local convenience shop stocks dozens of brands of sugary sodas and sweetened teas, sold in small, affordable bottles. The beverages are marketed as modern, aspirational, and safe to drink compared to untreated water from the pump. Ramesh has watched dental decay and obesity become increasingly common among his students, some as young as 8 years old. "We never saw this before the soda trucks started coming here," he says. "Now every child drinks 1 or 2 a day." And then there's the story of Linda, a 48-year-old office worker in Manchester, England, who never thought of herself as unhealthy. She didn't eat much junk food, but she started every morning with a flavored latte and ended most evenings with a healthy granola bar or flavored yogurt. When she was diagnosed with fatty liver disease, she was stunned. Her doctor explained that hidden sugars in her daily diet, from her coffee drinks to her low-fat snacks, had silently contributed to her condition. "I thought sugar was bad for teeth," she says, "but I didn't know it could kill me." These are not isolated cases. Across the globe, millions of people are living with non-communicable diseases linked to excess sugar consumption, diseases that often come with financial burdens. The The costs of insulin medications for heart disease, dental treatments, and liver care can devastate families, particularly in countries without strong healthcare systems. And the cruelest twist, many victims of sugar addiction never realize the full extent of the industry's role in shaping their choices. In communities where sugary products are marketed as a sign of success, trying to change habits can be socially isolating. A teenager in Mexico who stops drinking soda might be teased for being boring or stingy. In Fiji, where sugary drinks have become part of traditional celebrations, refusing a glass can be seen as disrespectful. These cultural shifts didn't happen by accident. They were engineered through decades of targeted advertising and corporate sponsorship. Even when individuals manage to reduce their sugar intake, the addictive nature of the substance makes relapse common. Brain imaging studies have shown that sugar activates the same reward centers as drugs like cocaine, flooding the brain with dopamine and reinforcing cravings. For someone who's been consuming high amounts of sugar since childhood, withdrawal can bring headaches, irritability, and fatigue symptoms that make it all too easy to fall back into old habits. The generational impact is perhaps the most alarming. Children born to mothers with high sugar consumption during pregnancy have a higher risk of developing obesity and metabolic disorders. Families caught in cycles of poverty often pass on dietary patterns that favor cheap, high-sugar foods over more expensive fresh produce. By the time these children reach adulthood, their palates are so accustomed to sweetness that healthier alternatives taste bland or unappealing. Public health advocates argue that this is exactly why sugar should be treated like a public health emergency. The damage isn't just individual, it's systemic. It affects workforce productivity, strains national healthcare budgets, and reduces life expectancy. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence, the industry continues to operate with minimal restrictions in most parts of the world. The human cost is not an abstract concept. It's Maria's son checking his blood sugar every morning before school. It's Ramesh's students losing their baby teeth to decay. It's Linda learning that her healthy snacks were slowly destroying her liver. It's billions of people who didn't choose to become dependent on sugar, but were guided there by design. The story of sugar is one of seduction, dependence, and deception, but it doesn't have to end there. Across the globe, governments, health organizations, and grassroots movements are pushing back, determined to reclaim public health from an industry that has spent decades engineering addiction. The fight is uphill, but history has shown that powerful industries can be held accountable when public awareness reaches a tipping point. One of the most visible battlegrounds is policy. Countries like Mexico, Chile, and the United Kingdom have taken bold steps to curb sugar consumption through taxes, warning labels, and marketing restrictions. Mexico's soda tax, implemented in 2014, led to a measurable drop in sugary drink purchases, especially among low-income households. In Chile, black stop sign warning labels now appear on products high in sugar, salt, or saturated fat, and cartoon characters once used to market sugary cereals to children have been banned. These policies send a clear message: sugar is not harmless, and consumers deserve the truth. Yet the industry's pushback is relentless. Corporations fund lawsuits to delay regulations, lobby politicians behind closed doors, and launch PR campaigns portraying taxes and labels as nanny state overreach. They emphasize personal choice while ignoring the billions spent manipulating those choices. In some cases, they even attempt to co-opt the language of public health, pledging voluntary sugar reductions or introducing healthier product lines, often changes so minimal they make little real difference. Grassroots advocacy is proving to be just as important as government action. In Philadelphia, parents and teachers organized to support the city's soda tax, framing it not as a restriction, but as an investment in schools and community health. In South Africa, activists exposed the beverage industry's attempts to delay the country's sugar tax, mobilizing public support that helped ensure its passage. Around the world, doctors, dietitians, and journalists are using social media to dismantle industry talking points in real time. Education is a key weapon in this fight. Many people still don't know how much sugar hides in everyday foods, from salad dressings to healthy granola bars. Public health campaigns that make sugar visible both in terms of quantity and health impact can shift behavior dramatically. In some countries, Simple visuals like teaspoons of sugar displayed next to drinks have sparked immediate changes in consumer choices. Technology offers new tools for resistance as well. Apps that scan barcodes and reveal hidden sugars give consumers the power to make informed decisions in the grocery store. Online communities share recipes for low-sugar meals, swap tips for overcoming cravings, and provide the kind of peer support that helps people stick to healthier habits. But systemic change requires more than individual willpower. It requires dismantling the structures that keep sugar cheap, available, and socially normalized. This means rethinking agricultural subsidies that make corn syrup and refined sugar cheaper than fresh fruit. It means ensuring access to clean water so sugary drinks aren't marketed as the safe option. And it means holding companies financially accountable for the public health crises their products have fueled. The parallels to the tobacco fight are undeniable. When the first anti-smoking campaigns began, Big Tobacco dismissed the evidence, blamed personal choice, and used its wealth to block regulations. But over time, as the truth became impossible to ignore, public opinion shifted. Laws followed, and smoking rates plummeted in many countries. Big Sugar is now at that same crossroads, and the next decade will determine whether we treat sugar as a manageable dietary choice or as a public health hazard requiring aggressive intervention. There are reasons to hope. Young consumers are increasingly skeptical of corporate marketing and more interested in health-conscious lifestyles. Some beverage companies, sensing the shift, are investing heavily in low or no sugar alternatives. Countries that have implemented strong sugar regulations are reporting early health improvements, and the success stories are influencing others to follow suit. Still, optimism must be matched with urgency. Every year that passes without decisive action is another year in which millions of children grow up on diets engineered for addiction. It's another year of rising diabetes rates, heart disease cases, and preventable deaths. The stakes could not be higher because sugar's legacy is not just measured in profits, but in lives. The truth about sugar addiction and corporate cover-ups is no longer hidden in obscure research papers or whispered among health professionals. It's out in the open, and the evidence is overwhelming. The question is whether we will allow the industry's misinformation to drown it out, or whether we will seize this moment to demand accountability. History will remember sugar not just for its sweetness, but for the bitterness of the lies that surrounded it. And perhaps if enough of us choose to act, it will also remember this moment as the turning point, the time when we decided that the health of our children, our communities, and our future mattered more than the profits of Big Sugar.